Good Saturday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for April the 1st. We have made it through the first 3 months of 2023 in our daily Bible reading, and we have made our way almost through the entire first 3 books of the Old Testament, Genesis, Exodus, and Leviticus. We will be beginning in, let's see here, we'll begin in Numbers sometime later on next week, and then we'll be done 3 for 3 months down, three books in. And I appreciate so much you taking the time to read along with me throughout the year. I hope that you have been able to familiarize yourself a little bit better with these normally less familiar books of the Bible. And I hope that you can say that your biblical knowledge has grown and that knowledge has led to an even greater faith in God, having learned more about Him and His character through these texts. Thanks so much for tuning in. Let me get the text of Leviticus chapter 20 up on the screen for us so we can read along together here. Leviticus chapter 20. Today we're going to focus on continued needs as far as holiness goes. The first section is going to focus on pagan practices. Then there's going to be a call in verses 7 and 8 for allegiance to Yahweh and holiness, so further affirming the need for holiness because they are the people of Yahweh. Then there's going to be violations of God's order concerning the family and other relationships and their punishments in 9 through 21. Again, an exhortation to holiness in the land, 20 through 22. And then finally, closing and inclusio, beginning with some pagan practices. We're going to close with a pagan practice in verse 27, looking at warnings against spiritism. Let's go ahead and get to reading here. Leviticus chapter 20, verse number 1. Yahweh spoke to Moses, say to the Israelites, any Israelite or alien residing in Israel who gives any of his children to Molech must be put to death. The people of the country are to stone him. I will turn against that man and cut him off from his people because he gave his offspring to Molech, defiling my sanctuary and profaning my holy name. But if the people of the country look the other way, when the man gives away his children to Molech and do not put him to death, then I will turn against that man and his family and cut off from their people both him and all who follow him in prostituting themselves with Molech. Whoever turns to mediums or spiritists and prostitutes himself with them, I will turn against that person and cut him off from the people or from his people. Consecrate yourselves and be holy, for I am Yahweh your God. Keep my statutes and do them. I am Yahweh who sets you apart, so who makes you holy and who sanctifies you. Verse number 9 of Leviticus chapter 20. If anyone curses his father or mother, he must be put to death. He has cursed his father or mother. His death is his own fault. If a man commits adultery with a married woman, if he commits adultery with his neighbor's wife, both the adulterer and the adulteress must be put to death. If a man sleeps with his father's wife, he has violated the intimacy that belongs to his father. Both of them must be put to death. Their death is their own fault. If a man sleeps with his daughter-in-law, both of them must be put to death. They have acted perversely. Their death is their own fault. If a man sleeps with a man as with a woman, they have both committed a detestable act. They must be put to death. Their death is their own fault. If a man carries a woman and her mother, if a man marries a woman and her mother, it is depraved. Both he and they must be burned, so that there will be no depravity among you. If a man has sexual intercourse with an animal, he must be put to death. You are also to kill the animal. If a woman approaches any animal and mates with it, you are to kill the woman and the animal. They must be put to death. Their death is their own fault. If a man marries his sister, whether his father's daughter or his mother's daughter, and they have sexual relations, it is a disgrace. They will be cut off publicly from their people. He has had sexual intercourse with his sister, he will bear his iniquity. If a man sleeps with a menstruating woman and has sexual intercourse with her, he has exposed the source of her flow, and she has uncovered the source of her blood. Both of them are to be cut off from their people. You must not have sexual intercourse with your mother's sister or your father's sister, for it is exposing one's own blood relative. Both people will bear their iniquity. If a man sleeps with his aunt, he has violated the intimacy that belongs to his uncle. They will bear their guilt and die childless. If a man marries his brother's wife, it is impurity. He has violated the intimacy that belongs to his brother. They will be childless. Verse 22, you are to keep all my statutes and all my ordinances and do them, so that the land where I am bringing you to live will not vomit you out. You must not follow the statutes of the nations I am driving out before you, for they did all these things, and I abhor them. And I promise you, you will inherit their land, since I will give it to you as a possession, a land flowing with milk and honey. I am Yahweh your God, who set you apart from the peoples. Therefore, you are to distinguish the clean animal from the unclean one, the unclean bird from the clean one. Do not become contaminated by any land animal, bird, or whatever crawls on the ground. I have set these apart as clean as unclean for you. You are to be holy to me, because I, Yahweh, am holy, and I have set you apart from the nations to be mine. A man or a woman who is a medium or spiritist must be put to death. They are to be stoned. Their death is their own fault. And that is Leviticus chapter 20. All right, thinking about this text here in Leviticus chapter 20, again, it begins, at least the way that the chapters are sectioned out, it does seem to form a clean inclusio, beginning with pagan practices here in verses 2 through 6, and then finishing with a pagan practice in verse number 27. Both of these sections, both the beginning of the inclusio and the closing of the inclusio, they both refer to these pagan practices. Number one, giving a child to Molech. Now, we have read elsewhere that this seems to be, but at least one of the aspects of this would be sacrificing a child to Molech. But there's also some thought that this could be talking about putting a child into cult prostitution on behalf of this pagan god, because remember that was one of the big aspects of paganism was the mixing of both religion and sexual activity. So that is also something that might be being thought of here. Both of these obviously are abominations, and the text says that if this happened, then those who do that must be put to death. God takes this very, very seriously, because what it does is it defiles God's sanctuary, and it profanes his holy name. But it's not just the perpetrator that would be punished, but also any of those who knew this was going on and did not do anything to stop it. They turn their face so they would not see it, and they might have plausible deniability, but in reality, God says, you know what's going on, you didn't stop it, you will be held accountable as well. Verse 6 talks about the mediums and spiritists, just as it does in verse 27. Again, whoever does this, says Yahweh says, I will turn against that person, cut him off from his people. Later on, they're going to be stoned. So this, again, very, very serious rebellion against Yahweh. Divine knowledge, you just need to worry about getting that from Yahweh. You just need to worry about listening to his prophets concerning divine knowledge. You don't need to look to anyone else to try to gain something that you think you need. God will give you exactly what you need. And finally, verses 7 and 8. Consecrate yourselves to be holy, so pursue holiness. Set yourself aside to be holy. Sanctify yourself to be holy. Be holy before Yahweh. Why? Because that's who I am. Yahweh says, I am holy, therefore you too must be holy. And this matters whenever it comes to the family units. And just the family as a whole was foundational to society, not only now, but especially Israel. Remember, it was a great nation of many families that were all related in one way or another. They were joined by their common ancestry from hundreds of years previously. This is one big family that God was looking to take care of. They need to make sure that the family remained pure and that things remained stable and as they needed to be. Everything that's mentioned here is a harm against that family. It causes problems within that family, and God takes that very seriously. To begin with, cursing father or mother. If you do that, to violate this fifth command, if you fail to honor your father and mother, and if you go so far as to curse them, maybe to lay a demonic curse on them, to wish that against them, that's so serious that you can be put to death. Actually, not can be, must be put to death. I want to note here in verses 9 through 16, the punishment for each of these is the language must be put to death. Adultery, incest, homosexuality, marrying a woman and her daughter, bestiality, all of those are punishable by death. Why so severe? Well, because the family of God, the nation of God, must remain holy. And in order to keep it holy, those who might seek to contaminate it through their wickedness and through the evil, they must be cut off. They must be erased from the people so that they cannot cause any further damage. Beginning in verse 17 and going through verse 19, those who are to be cut off are those who might marry his sister, or a man who joins himself to a woman on her period, or one who might join himself to a close relative. All of those are to be cut off. Again, that is the word karat. So is that again another call for being cut off by death, or is that being put away from the people and letting God take care of that? We're not entirely sure, but just to show again, they cannot be a part of Israel if they're going to behave in this way. And then finally, verses 20 and 21 talk about one who might sleep with his aunt, or one who marries his brother's wife. Again, we're not talking about levirate where the brother is still around, but we're talking about where not talking about levirate where the brother has passed away and he's doing a service in the name of his brother. But this is someone who's just taking his brother's wife for himself. Those, it says, are going to be childless. So that seems to indicate that Yahweh would be involved here, since he is the one obviously who has the control over the womb. We're reading this, you're thinking, man, a lot of this sounds really familiar. Yeah, it would sound familiar because many of these things have already been stated in chapter 18, but there within that particular text, the form of that text would be more a word called apodictic, which just means do not do this, or you shall not do this. Whereas here within the text of chapter 20, it is more casuistic, where if you do this, then this particular thing will happen. So you might note that that's the difference between chapter 18 and chapter 20, where many of these same things have been there as well before, now just adding on some more detail to it concerning why you don't need to do this and the punishment that's going to come if you do these particular things. All right, to finish up in verses 22 through 26, again, these are exhortations specifically concerning the land. But whenever you get into the land, to make sure that you keep all my statutes, all my ordinances, and do them, so that once you get in there, again, that way the land will not vomit you out. You must not follow the statutes of the nations I'm driving out, for they did these things. I abhor them, and that these things cause for the land to vomit them out. I want to note verse 24. I promised you. Here is Yahweh, his name coming into play, the character of Yahweh as seen in his name, the covenant name of God, Yahweh. I promised you, you will inherit their land, since I will give it to you to possess, a land flowing with milk and honey, a land full of many, many blessings. I am Yahweh your God, who sets you apart from the peoples. So I've kept my promise. I'm bringing you into this land. Hold up your end of this covenant by being my special people, by behaving like a special people. You need to be able to distinguish between the clean and the unclean. You need to be able to do that so that you yourselves will remain clean and not become unclean. You are to be clean. You are to be holy. Again, this is a repeat of verses 7 and 8. You are to be holy because I, Yahweh, am holy, and I've set you apart from the nations to be mine. If you're going to be mine, God says, you must be different from the nations, which is why there's been this very, very strong, extremely strong call and numerous warnings within chapters 18, 19, and 20 to not be like the nations. There's a reason God cast the nations away from himself. There's a reason why he got rid of them and chose Abraham alone, so they could be the type of people that he desires. The nations didn't want that. The nations wanted to go on their own way. So God said, that's fine. but I have my family is Abraham, and I am going to make them a special people. They're going to be different from the rest of the nations, yet it's through the work that I'm going to do through this special people that I'm going to eventually call the nations back to myself. And actually thinking about just Israel themselves, again, going back to Exodus chapter 19, they're going to be a kingdom of priests. They're going to be priests. What are priests to do? The priests themselves are to be mediators between the people and God. So this people should show others, and this is stated later on within, I believe it's within the Pentateuch. I think we'll read it either in Numbers and Deuteronomy. I could be wrong about that, where the nations will see the people of Israel behaving according to the law, and they will note the wisdom of the people and the wisdom of their law, because the way they live and their quality of life is just better. It's just better following the commands of Yahweh. So that's the exhortation here for the people. Be as Yahweh would have you to be holy, be sanctified, be set apart from the people. And certainly that is a lesson for us to learn today as disciples of Jesus Christ, that we need to be holy. We need to be sanctified. We need to be set apart from those in this world who live according to the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, who live according to the flesh. We must be different than them. And may God help us to certainly be so. I appreciate you tuning in on this Saturday for this reading. We're going to be back at it again tomorrow, reading, I believe, in chapters 21 and 22, looking at the holiness of the priest. We're going to look at the issue that physical defects could cause for priests. We're going to look at their food as well, and various sacrifices that will be acceptable to Jesus. I'm looking forward to reading with you about that tomorrow. Again, thanks for tuning in today. Hope you have a great rest of your Saturday, and we'll be back at it 8 a.m. in the morning. Hope you'll tune in. Take care, and God bless.